Donald Trump is panicking. Not in the quiet, reflective way that would be useful for a person entrusted with nuclear codes, but in the loud, flailing, attention-hijacking way that happens when your presidency depends on one fragile illusion, that everyone is forced to watch you. Because for Trump, power isn't just winning votes. Power is owning the camera. Power is forcing the country to sit down, shut up, and absorb his performance like it's mandatory programming. And now that spell is breaking. Instead of treating his State of the Union as the one moment where a president tries, at least tries, to speak to the entire nation, Trump has turned it into an infomercial for himself and an obedience test for everyone else. So the response forming against him isn't just criticism. It's something Trump fears more than criticism: refusal. People are choosing not to attend, not to applaud, not to legitimize the spectacle. And that's why this People's State of the Union counter-programming matters. It's not a stunt, it's a message. When lawmakers and organizers say they're not going to sit behind Trump while he recites lie after lie and demands gratitude like a king, they're saying something that should have been obvious a long time ago. The United States is not a reality show, and the presidency is not Trump's personal stage. The concept is straightforward. While Trump delivers his speech, a separate event airs, built around lawmakers and ordinary Americans directly impacted by Trump-era policies. Federal workers who lost jobs, immigrants targeted, families dealing with healthcare chaos, people trying to keep their heads above water while the administration obsesses over headlines and vendettas. The premise is devastating to Trump because it reframes the night from "Trump speaks, America listens" into "America speaks." Trump gets fact-checked by reality, and the early numbers being floated, 19 senators and House members boycotting, with expectations it could grow into the 30 to 40 range, that's not just an attendance issue, it's an authority issue. Trump's entire brand relies on the image of inevitability. The idea that even if you hate him, you still have to show up and play your part in his ceremony. When elected officials refuse that ritual, they puncture the myth that Trump is the sun and everyone else is required to orbit. That's where this starts, and that's what has him rattled. Now let's talk about why this boycott is happening. Because the story isn't just Democrats' protest. It's what the protest is responding to. A governing style that treats the country as something to be dominated rather than served. You can hear it in the rhetoric around Homeland Security. The argument being pushed isn't about smart, lawful enforcement that respects constitutional rights. It's about expanding fear-based power. More masks, fewer guardrails, less transparency, more intimidation. The rhetoric is deliberately escalatory, meant to make Americans feel like there's only one choice: submit to the strong man or be swallowed by chaos. But here's the inconvenient truth. Americans don't want a militarized political culture where force replaces law, and they don't want anonymous enforcement acting like the public has no right to know who is exercising state power in their communities. Even people who disagree on immigration policy understand something basic. Government power must be accountable, visible, and constrained. When you start demanding exceptions, no cameras, no warrants, no oversight, you're not asking for security, you're asking for permission. And permission is exactly what Trump always wants. Meanwhile, while the country deals with real stress, rents, groceries, medical bills, energy costs, Trump sprints toward another obsession: monuments to himself. Lavish construction fantasies, ballrooms, grand expansions, as if the country's biggest priority is improving his personal palace aesthetic. It's the clearest symbol of what Trumpism is at its core. The public suffers, the leader decorates. And on the subject of suffering, you don't need a political science degree to see what's happening in household budgets. When people fall behind on utility bills in massive numbers, that's not a partisan narrative. That's a red alert sign of economic strain. When affordability becomes the central crisis, people aren't being ideological, they're being practical. They're saying, "My paycheck doesn't stretch." And Trump's machine responds the way it always does. It gaslights. It tells people wages are soaring, costs are falling, everything is wonderful, while families are choosing between groceries and medicine. That's why counter-programming hits so hard. You can't lecture a family about economic strength while they describe past due notices. Reality interrupts the performance, and Trump's power depends on uninterrupted performance. There's also a darker strategic layer. Whenever domestic stress rises, escalation abroad starts surfacing. Chatter about strikes, conflict scenarios, war posture. That isn't leadership. That's distraction mixed with recklessness. It's a classic authoritarian reflex. When legitimacy wobbles, wrap yourself in war and dare critics to question you. But Americans have lived through what happens when leaders treat war as a political tool. We remember the lies, the mission creep, the trillions spent, the families shattered. That's why conversations about limiting unilateral war-making power matter. A president does not get to treat war like an executive hobby. Now add another pressure point, the Epstein controversy. Whatever people believe about specific names or documents, what's undeniable is public reaction to selective transparency. For years, Trump's movement trained its audience to chant, "Release the files," when it served them. But when scrutiny circles back toward Trump world, suddenly urgency changes. Suddenly, accountability becomes a hoax. Suddenly, everyone is supposed to trust the least trustworthy people because they're the ones holding the keys. That contradiction isn't subtle, and it's part of why boycott energy is growing. A State of the Union is supposed to be a moment of democratic clarity. Under Trump, it becomes a moment of democratic insult. He demands attention while projecting contempt for transparency. And meanwhile, the Trump family continues operating in grievance as business mode, monetizing outrage, celebrating elite alliances, turning persecution narratives into profit. That's not a comeback story. That's the story. So when you step back, the People's State of the Union isn't just competing live content. It's a democratic reset button. It argues that the real State of the Union isn't in applause lines. It's in lived experience. In the worker who lost a job and is told to be grateful. In the family navigating fear. In the voter who doesn't want grand speeches, just affordability, healthcare, dignity, and stability. And here's the truth Trump cannot stand. Americans don't need him to narrate their reality. The more they speak, the less he controls. The more they compare notes, the weaker the propaganda becomes. Trump isn't panicking because he's criticized. He's panicking because he's being skipped, replaced on his own biggest night by a conversation that doesn't revolve around him. And that's the beginning of the end of any strongman act. The moment people realize they don't have to play along. So don't treat this like entertainment. Treat it like a civic lesson. Trump's power has always been a performance fueled by attention. Withdraw the attention, and you force him to confront the one thing he can't dominate, reality. And that, truth, accountability, dignity, is a state worth fighting for. I'm Isabella Pierce, and I'm just saying.